All right. Actually, I'm going to stand here and talk about my Seahawks for a little while, all right? Yeah. I wish it would have been a little closer. The fist pump would mean so much more. It was good, but thank you all for having me and being on here. It's great to talk innovation in general, and you know the key you're going to hear from me is innovation is about so many things, not just a buzzword, and we'll get into that as we go forward. But first, let me congratulate the finalists. I haven't been able to be here all day, but I spent a lot of last night reading the 30 write-ups for all the great stuff that's happening. And what I tried to capture in this presentation is, you know, what are the common elements? What are the key things that if you look across this landscape of innovation that's happening and was highlighted here in the show, or you hear about in the private sector, or you see in different corners of government? What's common across all of those, and how do we get there? Since we last met, and I saw on the introduction side it said acting or deputy director for management or something at OMB. Luckily, I've left that behind. This is one of the first speeches I've done, public speeches I've done in D.C. since almost last summer, I believe, and I've been a little busy since then. Last May, June timeframe, the president asked me to step up into the acting deputy director for management at OMB position, which was really fun. I had heard that there was a person going through the process, and so it was a fun experience to go into a job when you know you're going to be replaced in that job. But one of the important things I asked is that we still get a lot of runway to keep the momentum going, but doing 3 Senate-confirmed jobs at once, I will not recommend that for anyone. But it was quite the adventure to have some impact and kind of bring the principles of innovation and see how they played in the different disciplines that are management beyond IT. One of the key things we did was last July initiated the work on the president's second-term management agenda, highlighted by a cabinet meeting and some public remarks by the president on July 8th. And if you haven't seen his speech, I recommend going up to the White House website and checking it out. It actually encompasses some of the things I'm going to talk about today, but it kicked off a series of things that over the course of the second term you're going to hear more and more about. We also had the government shutdown for a little while. That was, you all remember that, noticed that. Government opened back up. The day the government opened back up, I think the Senate voted to open the government, and then immediately voted to confirm Beth Colbert as the Deputy Director of Management, thus taking the acting deputy off of my title and putting me back into the U.S. CIO role. And at that time, early October, there were a few things happening in the IT space that I won't dive into depth on, but it's given us a lot of perspective on where we were, where we are, and where we're going in federal IT as well. But I do have one. I'm going to start off with the kind of close here, and I do have one secret to innovating in government. And there's one thing you have to remember to really shake things up in government. You have to act the way you want the government to go, and that is just wear non-government clothing all the time. So you can see there I've got some fancy socks on, and I'm wearing a kind of wrist bracelet. I know what that is. No tie. I was also about 50 pounds heavier, which is good. I've got that going there. You'd say, well, this is kind of a non-event. It's a tech event. I'm at this. It wouldn't draw attention in D.C. Well, there you go. There was a news article written about that. The federal IT paparazzi were just maniacal on their ability to really hone in on this stuff. No, I thought that was quite funny. But coming into the government in 2009, I came from a long career in the private sector. I was at Microsoft when I left college, and was at Microsoft until I joined the administration in 2009. One of the things I got to do, and one of the fun adventures of my life before coming to the federal government, was I was Bill Gates' assistant, and in that helped write speeches, and I traveled with him and did a lot of stuff that was pretty incredible. From being there when we launched seminal products like Windows XP or Xbox or things like that, to helping him with the work he did to transform the Gates Foundation into a force for global good and global health. I was with him in India when some of the first polio vaccines were dropped into kids' mouths, and now in the last year or so, India has officially announced that polio is eradicated from that country, which is pretty incredible. So you think about those things, and you think about, that I thought to myself during that experience in my life that I was at the pinnacle of impact. I was there. I reached the mountaintop from the ability to have impact in society, in the world, and to make this positive difference. And then I came to the federal government. And I suddenly realized that, Microsoft and the Gates Foundation, Amazon, Google, name your favorite large kind of tech company, are nice little efforts compared to what the federal government can do from an impact. And all of you as tech leaders, both in government and the industry that affect government, carry with you this ability to drive that impact, to really have impact at incredible scale. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that throughout. But I put this picture up because coming to government sometimes felt a little bit like staring across the chasm, from the private sector. And I first came into the Federal Communications Commission, standing at the edge of this chasm. I was staring across, wondering, what's next? How do we build a bridge between the world I came from and the world I suddenly found myself in accentuated by a couple facts. One is, as I mentioned, I helped launch Windows XP at Microsoft in the fall of 2001, and I walked into the Federal Communications Commission up to my desk, and I jiggled the mouse, and there it was waiting for me nearly a decade after I had launched it. It's going back a few operating systems to play. I had to kind of remember, how do I do this? And then, and also the FCC at that time, which should be, in my perception, would be one of the agencies on the leading edge, was really behind the times. They hadn't embraced the use of technology. They kind of had fallen victim to much of what you see in government of kind of doing things the same old way and kind of keeping things going and not thinking about innovation as a core element of the culture. The FCC, when I arrived, was nearly at the bottom of the Partnership for Public Service's Best Places to Work rankings. I think it was actually in the bottom 2 or 3 small agencies in government. And so we had a big job ahead of us to think about, how do you bring an innovative culture? How do you shake things up across the board in your organization? How do you, inspire the people that are there, or even push them into certain new directions? And so we did a lot of work to focus on all of that. And the most amazing takeaway I had was, at the end of all of it, it was the people in the organization that did it all. It wasn't me. It wasn't me coming in and doing all the work myself or making changes. It was the people that were there that did the work. I was just able to put them in a different context. I was able to create a different environment around them that gave them permission to innovate, that gave them room to think differently, that gave them, inspiration and direction around continuous improvement and pushing the limits on how they thought about their implementation of everything that they did. And so we, at the end of the day, they're still there, and they're still working on it and doing it. And at the end of the day in government, the top of the pyramid, the leadership, turns over all the time. We need to think about how do we get employees in government, the people of government, to embrace innovation as a culture, so when you leave, it's left behind. And that's the key, is putting them into a different environment. So let's talk a little bit about that. So, the 3 big elements for me is, 1, it's about culture in government and thinking about that. 2 is it's all hands on deck. It's not just, this isn't just an IT opportunity, it's not just a human resources opportunity or an acquisition opportunity, it's every opportunity. It's everybody getting together and thinking about how do we go and seize upon this opportunity as a community to move the ball forward. And then 3rd is how do we break the entropy and focus on continuous improvement. So let's go into some of these. One, on the culture front, a lot of where we came in, when I came into government and shook that mouse at the FCC, or when I came to the White House and great strides had been made, the first order of business in government was steadying the ship and thinking about how do you draw a line around the things we've done in the past, the systems, the technology, everything else, in stop investing there and start investing in the new things to move the needle forward. And so a lot of our direction, a lot of our thinking in this was really rolling off the old in favor of doing the new. But to do that, we had to work really hard to communicate to people the nature of that work and the benefit of going that direction. There very much is a culture in government that to do more, you must spend more. And that growing, prior to this administration coming in, we were growing IT spending about 7% at a compound annual growth rate for almost the decade before coming in. Had we kept going, our roughly $82 billion spend on IT today would be in the hundreds of billions of dollars, 103, 105, right up in there at that growth rate, which all of you may say, well, that'd be great if we had more money and great if we do things in that way. But in reality, I would contend that cutting budgets and flattening them has inspired action in a way that has gotten all of us to pay attention to how do we do things in a different way. Because I think that is the most important element, not the money at the bottom line, but how do you drive change through different forcing functions. And so that is a key one. And steadying the ship is also, how do you nail the basics? Just get the basics of your organization right. There should be one email system, one way of buying a computer, one way of doing mobile. Just nail all that stuff, and then think about how am I delivering service capability and solutions to my organization in a way that's going to drive, more change, innovation, and more importantly, mission success. Another key element of culture is we have sort of established a culture in government over time. These are all hasty generalizations, and I know I'm talking to this group that are innovation finalists, and you're not doing this, but I'm embodying the changes here. There's a general culture of big failure. And by big failure, what I mean is when I'm faced with a big technology challenge, what I normally do is I walk down the hall, I get an acquisition person, we write an RFP that leads to a solicitation on the street. You go and get a vendor. That vendor then builds a solution, and then you sort of finish that narrative. And big idea leads to big specifications, leads to big RFP, leads to big vendor, leads to big solution, is not the way that is sustainable. Going that path, what ends up happening is you certainly have a great idea and you've got this plan and you've probably got some notions about what your spend is going to look like over multiple years because this thing's going to take multiple years. Well, certainly in year one, you're starry-eyed going into that thing and thinking that this is going to be the solution to end all solutions. Well, then year two, you don't quite get the money you thought you were going to get. And the vendor you're working with is working on planning and spending lots of money there, and so you end up kind of leading most of the budget in this kind of planning exercise. And then the project lead or the executive champion of this thing finds another job and they go and they leave, because on average sometimes in the political spheres that's about 18 months that people turn over. Or laws that are underlying the solutions evolve or change. Technology underlying the solutions evolve or change. And by the end of this process, you look back upon it not knowing until like year 3 or 4 that the thing is actually failing and the decision you made in year 1 was affecting that outcome, that you need to go back and re-examine it. So when I say fail fast versus fail big, we need to think really hard about how do we challenge ourselves to break these things down, to start small, to iterate rapidly, to do things in a way that you can fail and learn from that failure and then move quickly into the next phase. And if you go onto the West Coast and talk to from the startup companies to the largest companies to Northern Virginia, and you talk to the IT people running some of the major vendors that deal with the government, this is the new normal. This is the mentality is of I need to start with a seed idea, I need to get it out quickly. I would challenge all of you, if you've got some big idea, some big procurement, one, that this year marks the end of that behavior, that we can say that no longer will government do that. And two is, how do I think about what you can do for $10,000? What can you do under the simplified acquisition threshold of $150,000? What could you get done in that mindset for what you're doing inside your organization, and go after it. But the next point is accept and embrace your weaknesses. after a product shipped in the company I was in, we would always do after-action reports. We'd go in and look at and understand, okay, what went well, even successful ventures, what went well, what didn't go well, what could we do better next time, how do we embody that learning into everything we do, how do we communicate that up the chain and build a culture in our organization where that truth to power leads to incredible outcomes. And so I think it's important to think about that as you venture forward and our tech leaders. And the last point is something I've iterated all the time in the private sector, I iterate here in government, is don't let tactics drive your strategy. Have your strategy drive your tactics. Think about what outcome you want to drive and work your way back from there. If you've got some challenge that you're facing that you're thinking, okay, I need to communicate with a bunch of people or build some place that lots of people can collaborate, think about the nature of the collaboration. Don't think I need to build a website to get there, or I need to build some portal to get there, I need to build some app to get there. Think about the outcome you want to drive, go talk to your customer, and then understand how best to reach those people. And so that's a very important notion of where you want to go. One of the disciplines that I brought to Microsoft, and I still do this in my life, is when I'm starting a new venture, and in that case I would incubate a product, or I'm starting a new job, I would write the press release for my last day on the job, on day one. Or I would write the press release for the product launch on day one, just to make sure that I could always keep the important in line with the urgent. And I would always keep my eye on the prize of where I wanted to go. Now, things would evolve. Things would obviously change, and you shift course all the time. But if you're always thinking about what's that outcome and have the long view on the outcome and work your way back, that's an important, very important notion. The second important point is around people. This is, as I mentioned earlier, an all-hands-on-deck effort. If we do these sessions in the future, we have future ACT-IAC events and technology events that we're doing. Bring along, have a buddy system, and bring along your acquisition person. Bring along your person in the HR department. Bring along your person in the finance department, and make sure that they understand the nature of what you're doing. Go get involved in the acquisition process in a deeper way. Even if your culture doesn't allow it, go figure out how to make it allowed, and think about how do you cross-pollinate this stuff, because it's so important. We could sit around all day and look at all the solutions that were finalists here and probably say, wow, they did modular approaches, they did agile approaches, they did things that are, embraced open data, or did things that were, very 21st century. And I bet if you trace them back, it was some lawyer in the GC's office that gave them permission to do that. It was some acquisition person who was kind of leaning a little forward on their ability to interpret the FAR in a way that could steer them in the right direction. It was all the things, the elements, the secret sauce is really about the people around you. At the FCC, for me, it was this wonderful guy in the GC's office who had been there forever. It was his lifelong career, but he was willing to I think he'd gotten an iPhone, he had gotten some different technology, he realized there's a world out there that we could seize upon if we did things differently, and it was my relationship with him that made me successful, that put me eventually in the White House. And it's that cross-pollination that we have to think about. The other element, the important element, is customer centricity. It's really thinking about your customer and working your way back. This is both on the strategic side as well as, just in everything we do. If we look at government, websites, you go to Google and you type in, how do I export my product, and you limit it to government websites, you're going to see more than one, if not about 10 or so, federal agencies pop up on that search. And from a customer perspective, think of that small business that's starting up somewhere in the Midwest, and they want to go and export their product worldwide and create jobs and do all this, create vibrancy in our economy. They're going to have a tough go going after 10, figuring out how to navigate 10 different federal agencies. If if we go to USA.gov, which is a federal search engine for aggregating federal content, the #1 search item on USA.gov is about driver's licenses, which we're either failing in civics classes or we've got a big opportunity from a customer standpoint. There's more than one student aid website the Department of Education is working on that. And there's so many cases where we do something just wonderful in the small, in the micro. We need to think about how do we scale that into the macro and build centricity around these efforts government-wide. And so that's an area I think we have a lot of opportunity. On the inspire and push point, thinking about how do we balance that. This can't just be edicts from above. It can't be going in and telling your organization, do this, do that. It's got to be about showing them the art of the possible. As as all of you being leading technologists in government, it's bringing those inspirational solutions, talking about technology in a way that can, show the way for folks is really, really important. For those of you that are in the private sector working with government, it's, I challenge you to question and ask questions and help push us in a direction that's going to move the needle on things. Something that I've been getting the advice of ACT-IAC and others recently on a lot of this as well, helping us think about how to get both inspire and push to happen. And that's really the key driver on private sector engagement. Think about use of challenges. Think about use of ways of integrating and talking to the private sector and others. The Presidential Innovation Fellows Program, your ability and authority to do Schedule A hiring and limited term hiring inside your organizations. Taking advantage of those opportunities to engage the private sector can be pretty powerful if you let that happen. I think involving private sector and bringing them into government in a way that sort of adds on and builds synergy between your federal employees and the private sector can be a terrific way of kind of changing the dynamic inside the organizations. And then the last point is on really just breaking the entropy. As I mentioned before, anyone that says, well, that's the way we've always done it, or you take if you have some solution and you're just going to take a paper form and all the processes that go around the paper form and you're just going to convert that into electronic versus rethinking the process altogether, thinking about the customer altogether, thinking about what are the outcomes I'm trying to do and drive, and then asking yourselves every single day, how do I change the way we do things? How can I do this better than I've done before? And questioning the aspects of rules and everything else that are applied to you. Some very wise federal employee, when I first got to the FCC, this woman, just wonderful woman named Wanda Sims, came to me and said, well, at this organization there's red laws and there's blue laws. And the red laws are the real ones. They're on the books. They're the ones that by law you have to follow. The blue laws are ones that people will tell you that's a law or that's a rule, but they really aren't. They're just things that we've built into our culture. And so asking yourself, like, where in the FAR does it say that? Or why can't I do it this way? And looking across and building networks, looking at the solutions that were presented here to learn from those things and to drive that forward. And then again, it's important enough to say twice, maybe 4 times or 5 times, focus on your customer. Thinking about who your customer are. And even if you're in DOD, you might say, I don't really have customers. You do. They're veterans. They're active duty military. They're people that are out there using your solutions to meet the mission of your organization. And so think about that every single day. And how do you work back from the customer? When's the last time you did a focus group? When's the last time you brought your key customers in and just asked them, is this thing working for you? Is it not? There's flexibility within the Paperwork Reduction Act to put surveys up on your website and ask people, how's this working for you? Is it doing other things? So I challenge you to go do those things, and at zero cost you can gain a lot of insights by doing those. So the bottom line on innovation from everything you've heard is our time is now. I spent a lot of time in the last few months, helping to formulate the President's FY15 budget and sitting through what are called director's reviews and these summary sessions and things where you go and you talk about what's going to make up the budget. And I won't dive into the budget today because we haven't presented it to Congress, but the prevailing theme throughout the budget is tech and innovation. It's part of everything we do. And to drive that impact at scale, to go change the world and do all those things that I know that federal employees wake up every single day thinking we're doing, and we really do have that impact and that ability to drive impact at scale. Our time is now to do that because technology is just a part of everything. We have a modest tech budget compared to the federal budget, but it's we are moving a sector of the economy through our actions, and by such, moving the world. And so I encourage you to all embrace this, embrace the solutions you've heard today, take what you've learned, take it forward, and build communities, build support, question the norm, and drive real change. Thank you.